This week, Lara's sniffing around the scientists who are bringing historic smells back to life.
So I guess I just put my nose in here.
Delightful.
We're on the high-tech farm in Iceland where they're turning algae into something more appetising.
This is hummus, and it's blue. It's not a bad thing.
But it is blue. Anyway, we'll also meet the actors who say their voices have been manipulated by AI. This is Formula Student, a world series of events that took place this summer featuring electric cars built by teams of students from 100 universities across the globe. On tracks throughout Europe, the cars competed in disciplines including autocross, racing through Formula One-like twists and turns as fast as possible, an endurance trial through more than 20 kilometres of track to push the limits of battery management, a test of grip and downforce by basically going round in a circle as fast as possible. And then there's acceleration. It's a drag race basically, and it's this last challenge that one team, AMZ Racing, absolutely blasted last year, going from 0 to 100 kilometres an hour in, well, I'll let you know a bit later. AMZ includes students from Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts and ETH Zurich, and I dropped in on the team's Swiss HQ. And up here is the electronics department at AMZ Racing. We're going to meet Lara. Not that Lara. For one car to excel at all of these events, it not only has to have a powerful motor, but also computers have to control the traction and fine-tune the speed of each wheel individually, and somehow it has to stick to the ground to give the tyres more grip. AMZ achieved this with powerful fans that actually sucked the ultralight vehicle to the tarmac. Are you building on the last year's design, or have you completely reinvented anything?
Every year we design a completely new race car. I mean, of course we orient ourselves on the design from last year. As you might have seen on the car, the downforce with the fans we had, we improved not the same concept, but kind of is based on the same physics behind it.
Is this something you want to do in the future? Do you want to work on like racing cars?
I mean, it'd definitely be fun and really interesting, but I'm not sure yet. We'll see.
Depends how it goes this year, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, the point of this competition is less about the winning and more about the learning.
Getting to work on such a project during your studies is an incredible knowledge gain. I mean, if I compare myself 3 years ago before I joined the association, I know very little about engineering compared to what I do now. There are some things that might get adopted in industry. However, I think the main thing is just to really get those engineers already to have some practical experience during their studies.
So, about that acceleration challenge. Now, after last year's Formula Student competition, the team decided to specifically re-engineer the car to try and break the world acceleration record and go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in the shortest time for an electric car. This was the vehicle, and the target time, well, that was already astonishing. So in 2016, ETH held the record, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in
1.513 seconds.
Okay, 1.5 seconds.
1.5 seconds.
Okay, and then in 2022, Stuttgart came along and did it in
1.46, so about 0.05 of a second.
And then last year, you came along and did 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in how much?
A bit less than a second, 0.956.
0 to 60 in less than a second. What does that feel like?
It feels insane. So you just feel this push, and you can't even blink. It's already over.
Do you have time to do any steering, or do you have to hope it's pointing in the right direction?
You have to hope that it points into the right direction. But this we control before every start, and there is maybe a little bit of steering, but it's just intuitive.
Now, when I visited AMZ a few weeks before this summer's competition, I got to witness the very first day of testing this year's brand new car. Expectations were high. All our cameras were set to catch the high-speed action. And
was that close to the world record? I'm not an expert, but...
okay, look, this was actually just a test to see if all the computers and sensors were talking to each other. The fact the car moved at all was considered a success. But come the Formula Student Tournament itself, AMZ did brilliantly, winning events in Switzerland, Hungary, and the biggest one in Germany. And, equally importantly, the next generation of engineers has done its qualifying lap.
With short summers and a cold climate and a landscape of lava fields and glaciers, Iceland's not the first place you'd think of for farming. But pioneering entrepreneurs are growing some surprising crops and doing it sustainably. Inside this warehouse on the outskirts of Reykjavik is a vertical farm. Vaxa means grow in Icelandic, and they're cultivating leafy greens. More like a lab than a typical farm, this is what's known as controlled environment agriculture.
Here we have whole head lettuce, baby leaf, a lot of herbs, and these mini microgreens.
Almost every detail is precisely fine-tuned.
We can optimize everything: humidity, water, light hours, nutrition. We do not have to depend on sunlight here in the farm. The plants have high-quality LED lights where we can use the green energy of Iceland to grow the plants.
That means they can produce salad year-round, even in the darkest winters. And there's no soil here, just water.
This is like a hydroponic system. We actually can circulate, reuse the water again, so we need like 90% less water than in an open field farm.
Outside of Reykjavik, this is the country's most powerful geothermal plant.
While Iceland's northerly location and climate may seem a disadvantage when it comes to farming, it's the limitless supply of clean energy that's also helped it to innovate.
The glowing lights take a little getting used to, and inside is like nothing I've seen before. This tech firm has invented what it calls an energy-to-food platform.
Now, this place is not your typical farm. It's super high-tech, and growing inside these units is microalgae. Algae's not something that many of us eat today, but it could well be a food of the future.
It's rich in protein, iron and fatty acids. And Vaxa Technologies, unrelated to the salad producer, hopes to make this algae an everyday part of our diet.
It's a new way of thinking about food production. This system uses a fraction of the land, a fraction of the water needed. It's carbon negative.
Energy, CO2 and water. That's all that's needed for this aquatic organism to grow.
It photosynthesizes. The algae is eating CO2, or it's turning the CO2 into biomass.
It's all tightly controlled using artificial intelligence to find the perfect conditions. This pink-purple glow comes from the tiny red and blue lights.
Instead of spending our electricity in making wavelengths that they don't use, we are only giving them the light that they use to photosynthesize.
This system gets clean electricity from the neighbouring geothermal plant, as well as water for heating and cooling, and even the CO2 that the algae take in.
Algae, they are extremely efficient in changing light into biomass. We can use 100% of this biomass for food.
It also grows very fast, and once harvested, it looks like this, which, to be frank, doesn't seem hugely appetizing. So, time to give it a try.
This is hummus.
And
It's blue. It's not supposed to be a punishment. It's not a bad thing. I suggest you try the skin.
Okay, it doesn't taste unusual at all.
But then there's a surprise.
I'm not sure how I feel about this.
Try
But it doesn't taste of much. I think it's more the texture. I think it's going to take a bit more to wrap my head around this one.
Maybe it will catch on, but I'm not sure I'm ready for blue food just yet.